Perfect. Okay, so let's go. So welcome to the Geneva Hub. So it's a pleasure to start this new series of a webinar. Maybe we can move to the next slide, just to explain that what we just explained in 2 minutes what a hub is. What's the reason we are doing that, and I will then handle the micro to Kevin that will explain the framework to the Explorer. So it's a network of local community for learning and sharing. So it's not only to learn, but also a lab for experimenting. So we are now a team of members. Some are online today, and we are now expanding the community and increasing the visibility of system innovation. Maybe next slide.
Yep.
So the hub are located in many cities. Geneva, we started now 10 months ago, and the network is expanding. So there is a local hub, and there is also some specific group of experts, and there is a lot of sharing between this local hub. So yes, next slide. I think it's important to understand that what we want to achieve is to move in different domain expertise. And when we talk about system innovation, it's a mix of system thinking and innovation. And when we want to tackle those wicked problems that we will discuss today, we need a mix of different domain expertise from design thinking, system thinking, innovation, and whatever. So we want now I will handle the micro. Next slide, if you want to Kevin. So you add the slides. That's great. So
yeah, I told you I added them.
Okay, so I was explaining something. So you see that it's a different domain expertise, and moving from system thinking to complexity science or system change up to system innovation. It's a very broad area, and this pool of knowledge and this interactivity between different diversified domain expertise are key. And the hub, the different hub is a place to learn and to share and to do some part. On next slide. So exactly. So again, different challenge, what we call the wicked problem. There is different video to explain that, and we can also, of course, after the presentation, to discuss more in detail about this kind of wicked problem linked to the complexity. And of course, there is many topics that will be covered, and we are quite focused now on impact investing and climate change, but there is many other interesting topics to fulfill. And the first part of this discussion is how to explore, what tools we need, our concept we need to start to understand how to tackle this wicked problem. So next one. So the Explorer framework, it's a very innovative, a mix of not so innovative, but integrated in an innovative way. And it's a pleasure that Kevin will explain more in details this framework. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Yves. Yeah, so as you said, the Explorer framework is nothing new in itself. It's a recombination of existing ideas. The concept behind the framework arises from this sometimes limited understanding of what is design and how we can do design, and basically design is often framed around problems, and it's framed in a way that's usually we in the design literature and the design language would say we say that design is here to find solutions to problems. This works to a certain degree, and this works well for certain type of problems, but we cannot approach intertwined and complex challenges the same way we approach the development of an application, or the same way we create websites. It's really not the same type of understanding that we need to find a way to act in those kind of challenges. And so the idea of this framework is to see how we could use especially metaphors as a way to help people think about those kind of challenges and approach it. I don't think it's limited to design, but as I am a designer, I see it as a way to do design. So first of all, I think it's important to define what we mean by design and what we mean by innovation, right? Because those two are, close together, and they're often used not necessarily interchangeably, but in a way that is related. So my idea is here to first start by defining those. Disclaimer, it's my definition. Those are my definitions. I'm open to challenge. If someone wants to change those definitions, I'm open to that. But first of all, what is design? And to me, design is any type of process or activities that give birth to a medium for interactions. And this idea of medium for interaction is the kind of medium that help catalyze changes. And it can be any type of changes. It can be behavior change. It can be a change on how we view things or how we think about things. So for me, it's a broad definition. The idea is to remove any type of too context-dependent type of definition, like let's say design is a way to create better products, for instance, is already too narrow and context-dependent definition. So we extract ourselves from the context, but the context is included in a way in this definition, because when we say medium of interactions, that means that we need to understand in which context this medium can be applied and can be used, and what type of interactions do we mean, and what type of changes are we looking for. So it means from the beginning to gain understanding to be able to act. Now, the second definition that I want to give here is my definition of innovation. Here again, I try to remove any type of solution or context-dependent definition. So to me, an innovation is significant positive impacts or changes in a context, in a given context, and it's quite often the context we are trying to act in. And this type of definition has the advantage to say something that we don't often hear, is that for me, an innovation is something that we can only understand afterwards. This is something we observed happened in a context, and we can now say, yeah, this was an innovation. This is not something that we can do in the present. We do things and we hope that it will have impact on wherever we are working. And once it happened, we say, oh, it was an innovation. And what is interesting with that definition as well is that we can see that many actors that are trying to do many different things, those are all they are all part of the changes, of the impacts, and it helps us to gain, a more broader view of what type of changes are happening in our landscape, and what type of changes can those activities brought. So this to me helps to link to the two in an interesting way, because if we want to create a medium for interaction to raise significant impact in our context, basically we are doing innovation as per the common definition. So now we go to how we link that to the metaphors I was talking about. And I think one thing I wanted to bring with the framework is this idea that when we are working in any type of context, we already have like an understanding, some form of understanding of this context, and therefore we already think of some kind of solutions or type of things we could do. And this brings biases in a way that we are acting with a motivated reasoning. We are motivated to go towards what we see is the best way to do things. And the idea with the framework is to say, oh, maybe we can take an approach where we try to reflect on those kind of motivated reasoning and be more curious about what is really happening in the landscape, and not just what we want things to be. And so be less problem solvers and more curious explorers. And the metaphor mainly revolves around this notion of islands and exploration. And so the little story I have with this with the framework is that we imagine that we are on a boat on seas, and on the horizon we see an island, and we can see its shape. We can maybe guess that there's a mountain there, that there's a cliff, vegetation, shores, but we cannot see it in details. And this island is the challenge that we are facing. This island is the metaphor of what we want to understand and what we want to have an impact in. And yeah, and so what is interesting with this metaphor is that we don't know when we approach the island, that we don't know exactly how big it is. We don't know who lives there, what type of animals or type of vegetation. And so we say, okay, let's start exploring this island. And we arrive on the shore and we go to the first entrance we see in the forest, and we see like this waterfall. And what is interesting there is that it's hard to infer any type of conclusion about the island from this narrow perspective we had on it. Might be the case that on the other side of the island there's a desert, that there's a volcano on top. It's not a mountain, it's a volcano. That's there's a lake, there's inhabitants somewhere in the island that we don't know about, because where we started to explore is not a good representation of the entire island. And so to keep this idea that we have a limited access to information, and that whatever thing we are trying to do, we are always trying to do it from a certain perspective, from a certain understanding. And when we try to think in terms of islands, we can bring in other type of analogies or metaphors that are, things that we do in real life when we have a landscape, is that we are trying to understand its topography, to see how the ecosystem evolved around this topography, how the terrain influenced how vegetation grow, where animals go to find food and stuff like that. And so we can imagine this as how information flows in a landscape, and how the terrain influences the path of information. And so, yeah, here are some examples. And we can try to represent visually our challenge in this form, and we try to understand how those things can have an impact on how we will approach the challenge. And another idea that is really key to understanding that we might not have we might never reach a point where we will have a good view, a clear view on the overall island by trying to exploring it, is that we might prefer to build a network within the island or here within our challenge to gain this sense of overview, instead of from our own perspective to try to accumulate everything we saw so far and say, oh, this is the broader picture. Because what the network will bring is the type of perspectives that we will never have, because we don't live in the island. We are just here as explorers. And so we don't know exactly all the little details. If you go in vacation somewhere and you don't know about all the good places to go, you don't know where are the good restaurants, you don't know where are the best place to party, for instance, and stuff like that. You will ask local people to give you direction, and they might know it way better than anyone, even guides, even than the best guide you can find, because they live there and they know way better the interaction between the people and the places and stuff like that. So this might give you a more fine and interesting understanding that whatever you yourself could try to do. And so this idea is to create a network within the challenge of key people that you might encounter when you try to navigate in the landscape, and they will bring you some partial information about their local view of the challenge, but cumulated, you will have a bigger picture of what is happening, and a way also to detect changes in the landscape that you might not be able to do by yourself. You might not be able to see something happening here if you are here. So the network will bring you this kind of information and enable you to act in the landscape in a different way, because now you rely on your network to influence the landscape. And so you can have like a different type of activities or actions going on at different points of the island to try to change the overall landscape. The idea of this network is highly linked to this notion of information and data. And the best way to understand it is through another metaphor is the metaphor of energy. And if we look at information or data as energy, we can use the same type of properties that energy has to understand how we can gain, how we can interpret this information, how we can retrieve it, and how we can use it. So energy, like electricity is interesting because it's not energy in itself, it's a medium for energy, and this medium will constrain energy, the energy that goes through in various ways. It will have losses like heat. Some part of the energy is transformed as heat, and you will lose this energy. So everything about the medium has impact on the output you can do with the type of things you can do with the energy in the end. And if you see information this way, you understand that the way you will try to gain knowledge about the landscape, and so the way you will try to gather information will have a huge impact on the way you will be able to understand and use the data in the end. And so a good example of that is now if we have an informal conversation together, I might have some questions, but the fact that it's informal, you can bring to me way more information than what I could even ask. I don't know that you know something about anything that is relevant to me. So I cannot ask this question, but by the fact of discussing, you realize that this information might be important to me. And so you can bring it to me in a way that it was not expected. And this is the same in the opposite. You can have like a really narrow question, like a form, online form, like a survey. You will ask questions with just yes and no reply. So you constrain the type of information that can go through your system and the type of output you can do with that information, because you only know what you ask for. So it's not that one is bad and the other is good. It really depends on at which state of knowledge you are in the process of understanding the landscape, that you will use certain form of constraint on information to understand certain type of thing from your landscape. So for instance, when you don't know about anything, using a survey is maybe not a good way. It's not a good way, or it's not the best thing to do. Another thing that is interesting to understand is that you have different way to gain this information. So not only the medium, but the type of interaction that you expect from this medium. Having an informal discussion involves the two of us to be highly synchronous, to be there together, and that the information flows in both direction in the same way. I cannot sustain an informal conversation if I have to write down everything and wait a few minutes that you answer me everything, and etc., etc. This constrains how information flows, and by definition, it will constrain everything about what I can share with you, or the opposite. And the difference in the opposite way, having a survey is a really asynchronous type of gathering data. It's simple because you constrain a lot the information, so you don't expect much more than what you ask for, and so it can be totally asynchronous because it has no issue with that. So just understanding that those two key elements of how information flows and your network is really important, because if you build a network within your landscape and you always interact with them in a synchronous manner, an informal way, you will tire your network really soon. The network will have it will be heavy in energy for them to sustain this type of interaction on the long run. So you have to oscillate or to variate between type of ways to connect with your network and the type of medium you use to connect with your network, to be sure that you are not always in a certain mode that at some point people will just fatigue and don't want to be involved in your network anymore. So those kind of elements are really key to how you interact with your network and how you gain knowledge about the landscape or the island. And so the idea of everything, of all of that I showed you, is instead of finding a solution for a specific problem, here you are a fuzzy situation. You don't know exactly what is the challenge. And although you rely on your network, you don't know if the network itself knows everything about the challenge. So the best thing you can try is not to find solutions, but to find direction, to find things you can try to do right now with the knowledge you have in your landscape, in a way that you try things. It's more like experiments that will change or deviate the current way things are done in your challenge, and bring you more closer to this idea of having impacts in your landscape. And what is interesting there is that your network you use it as a way to gain knowledge. You use it as a way to, might be the case that you use it also as a way to bring to life your experiments. And you can use it as well as a way to evaluate the impact, because now you have people that has a really good understanding of the landscape, and they know what are the type of expectations you can have for their specific perspective on the specific part of the island of changes that might be positive. And what is interesting here is that you delegate, you distribute the ownership within your network of change, the ownership of change, the ownership of what is a good change. And so you remove a risk of misinterpretation of on your side as the sole guy who understands what is the challenge and what should be done, and you distribute it within your network, and you use this network to say, yeah, it's a good, those are good things we see, it goes in the right direction, or no, it goes not in the right direction, and so you can adjust really quickly. And so it's this idea of repurposing your network. So I ask you the questions, the question, what is your island and what is its ecosystem? And so this will be, yeah, the open question for the open discussion that follows. So the presentation is done. I invite you to go to explorer.designcriticalthinking.com, where you can find all those information. It's like a mini guide. And that's it. So I hope you find it interesting. I don't know if any one of you have questions. I saw that in the chat it was active, but who has questions or remarks or challenge?
In the beginning, Gavin, you gave a definition of innovation.
Yes.
And you assume that innovation is always positive with the
yes.
And I don't think it's always positive. You have to look back afterwards and see what it has done. And sometimes it is a positive change. I assume you like to make a positive change with innovation, but it depends on the behavior of the users, the end user, and all the participants in the network.
Yeah, that's true. I do agree with you. The definition is not like it's always positive. Is that it's more like if it's an innovation, it's most of the people saw it as something positive. And this is where you bring this idea of the fact that the positive, it has to be defined by the people in the challenge you are working in. It might be not positive. If it's not positive, do we call it really innovation? I mean, if we create some kind of technology and we say de facto it's an innovation because it changed everything about this technology, but it has really put a negative impact on people's life, and people see it and say so. Is it an innovation or just a new technology that fails to do what it should do? I don't know. I don't know, but my definition has nothing to do with positive, like it's always good and progress is good. It's more like whatever people think is positive, then it should be the case, something like that.
Because I think decentralization is an answer on the centralized innovation. So then all the centralized innovation is a positive thing. So Google, Facebook, all that kind of platform economies are positive innovation. If I listen to your definition of innovation. So I would skip the word positive.
Okay,
but maybe when we because we are in the system innovation framework in a sense, and I think that the definition is a system thinking plus innovation equals system innovation. And in a sense, what is important is what's the value created and what's the value chain of impact. And I think when we define that among stakeholders, then we can define the true value added of the enabler of innovation. I think innovation alone is not an enabler of positive value chain. I think it's when it's integrated in the value creation. And as you mentioned, Marielle, I think when we move from a centralized to a more decentralized system on the pool of knowledge, then the pool of knowledge, this many stakeholder can create some positive solution, because the network effect and the collective intelligence can bring some positive value. And the technology innovation is allowing that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and with innovation, you can also change something that isn't valuable at this time. You can make it valuable. So if you watch the island and there are a lot of trees, then you can think of products, but with new matrix, with new oracles, you can also maintain the tree. So that's for me a real innovation. And if you just look at the island, you wouldn't come up with that, I think.
Nathan, I think we have a quick hand. Jonathan, you want to?
Yeah, hello. Thank you very much for the presentation. Yeah, just on the innovation side of things, I mean, I totally agree that innovation is not always positive, and I think it's very interesting to think about this. You mentioned Google and Facebook, which I really don't like at all, but I mean, I would notice that I mean, some people do find them valuable, and I think the problem is if we go out of the idea, if the idea is to make something that everyone finds valuable, basically there's no way out, it seems to me. I mean, at some point you have to define, okay, what is value, for who is it? I mean, something is valuable to someone will not be valuable to someone else. But I don't think we should mix up, let's say, values and what is valuable. I think it's different things, and one is politics and the other one is innovation, in my opinion.
And maybe I will add on this one. I think it's interesting when we deal with wicked problem. Again, this wicked problem is that it's not a linear, simple way to solve. So in a sense, when we have to deal that, maybe there is a kind of value for a situation very simple on a win-loss situation. But when you take into account all the externality in the value chain, probably you have to integrate more dimension, and that's more complicated. And when you move this kind of solution of this platform, like you mentioned, of the social platform, probably there is some positive value to use it. But if you took maybe all the value chain of the negative and positive externality, maybe it's more complicated to solve this issue of value with technology. And how do you integrate this asymmetry of information inside the value?
I don't know if Michaela, you said something in the chat. I don't know if you want to bring it.
Yeah, I was thinking that using the word positive is a moral concept, and I wonder if innovation is or should be interested in moral concepts. If you look at the play by Dürrenmatt, The Physicians, they just need to invent new things and to understand the world, whatever the consequences are. And so you've got this moral debate that I'm not sure this is the place for the moral debate. Innovation, is it moral? Is it immoral? Only time will tell. You know, sometimes things seem absolutely fantastic in the beginning and the negative externalities only appear over time. So I guess inventing tanks was fantastic for the army guys in the beginning of the 20th century. I'm not sure it's great for people who stand on Tiananmen Square, you know?
Yeah, this is, I mean, this is, I think, why there's two notions in the framework is what is the island? And might be the case that what you think is the island is not the island, in fact, might be bigger than the island that you already see. And this is why it's important to gain this knowledge from a network. and not just for yourself, from yourself, because of course you have a limited understanding, and as a human, you won't gain, you know, this idea of being an objective, you know, observer of the entire system, and no one will gain this this understanding. And as soon as you are humble about what you can actually learn and your current knowledge, I do think that, yeah, this discussion about, you know, positive is interesting. Personally, I do think that if you build a network and you let them define what is positive, as soon as you try to act with them in your landscape, they will tell you if what they see has negative consequences in their life. They will see it. It will have a tangible impact for them. And the fact that you listen to that and adjust is, I think, is key. Because you cannot know before trying to do exactly what will be the, to which extent everything will, you know, impact people. And I think it's useless to try to, that you can do it really fully. So you can have a control to a certain extent, and then after that you leave yourself open to whatever life brings to you, you know. So also being humble towards this realization is, I think, important. We cannot be right from the start go. So let's try to be less wrong together, something like that. You know, but yeah, there's place for this debate, I'm sure. It's really interesting. Yeah, thank you.
If you're adding into the mix the network that gives you feedback loops on the innovation, I think it can be like a measure of positivity for the majority. Or you get what I mean? It kind of, for the time being, in the context of now, the majority of the network think it's good. So let's call it positive now. And let's see if the context changes. Maybe something that was positive in the beginning becomes negative because it's not adapted to whatever you were intending.
Yeah, but I guess it's part of this, you know, the title was about escaping the problem solution, and I think something related to that is this idea of single point solution. Like we develop something unique to change something that is not unique, that is by definition intertwined to many other type of problems and many other type of contexts. And so it's hard to imagine that at some point something, one single thing will have obviously only positive impact. I do agree. So this idea is also to something that it is not here, but this idea of building like a portfolio of strategies that you can bring in your challenge, instead of thinking just about one thing you can do, is about what type of things, or, you know, plural, that you can try to, you know, direct or find if it's the good direction in the landscape. And it can be like change, you know, it can be processes, it can be strategies around connecting groups of people that are not connected today. It can be anything. It can be also a product, a physical or digital product. It can be anything. But as soon as you don't limit yourself to a certain type of outcome or output, I would say, you can see that you can have a diversity of impacts in your challenge, and not alone with your network.
I will ping pong to what Winnie said. I think, and probably can also talk, because I think I think when we deal with innovation now, I think it's to again enabler to solve a complex situation. If it's complicated, there is no issue to have an explorer on all these kind of things. We can solve complicated things. What we have difficulties to have issue with the complexity and wicked problem. And in this case, nothing to move to a centralized, to a distributed system versus a decentralized. I think where it's difficult now is is to find a solution in a truly decentralized way, because how do you aggregate this different collective intelligence? What the solution, intermediate solution, could help is, as you mentioned, a kind of stakeholder. And when you start your exploring the island, it's not a fully decentralized. It's a stakeholder that is expanding through the energy you have to expand the community, and through the network, the distributed pool of knowledge. You have some answer to the problem, or no problem, or whatever. But the fact that you can reduce the asymmetry information and creating this pool of knowledge maybe help to solve through experiment or scenario where you want to go. And it's a voting system instead a distributed pool of knowledge. If it's fully decentralized, probably we have some issue now because it's maybe more chaos than solution. Yeah. But again, I think the mapping, the stakeholder mapping, and the understanding how they work together and what type of energy they need to solve some issue, or if there is no solution, maybe it's just the path that it's important to find.
I don't know, Vinish, if you want to come and say something, if you have more to.
Yeah, I'm listening to the conversation. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Hi. So I'm just watching the conversation and listening to the dialogue. And in my experience, the challenge has been to unify the goals at all the stages. You know, so sometimes at the beginning of project, you see a unification of goals in the same language, that these may be the directions for the expected outcomes. But the team or the different stakeholders are not really flexible to adapt to the changes that the system experiences over time. So how do we, the question is, stakeholder mapping doesn't happen as often as it should be, in my experience. So if it is if it happens from point to A to B, it doesn't always translate in the same sense from point B to C. So that's where we see fragmentation creeping in gradually. So I'm not sure of the solution, to be honest.
Marielle, maybe you have some solution through the blockchain. It's time to come.
I always use a value stream mapping, and then see which participants are in the network, and then what do they do. That's very important for creating those success factors, I call them. And then you have to define if they are intrinsic or extrinsic motivated. So what do you think they will do their job? Because otherwise it won't happen. So you have to define the motivation for every stakeholder to align them with our success factors. I call them always success factors. I think it's hard to define a positive innovation because maybe the best way to do things is to do nothing. And I don't think that the network will decide to do nothing. So it's always the network that thinks it will have a positive impact, but yeah, we have to see it afterwards.
Yes, I completely agree with you, Mac. So it's important for us to take into account what are the internal and external factors influencing stakeholders into their behavior and the decisions they make when we are trying to solve a problem. So I believe that in many occasions, project managers or people in charge of leading projects tend to focus a lot on the technicality of the problem, like what are the actual elements influencing the problem in terms of resources, in terms of actions that are needed to be done to deliver something, but not much is integrated in terms of the human part of delivering these solutions. And there is where I believe the internal or external elements of people's motivations need to be taken into account. Maybe that's a bit abstract. I need to disentangle this idea. So what I mean by that is that when we are trying to solve a problem, we need to take into account part of the complexity of the problem includes the human behavior, or the interests, or the goals, or the loyalties, or the values, or what are the losses of the people that are supposed to take action to lead to that solution. And there's how I think we can break this inertia. So we, in a lot of occasions, expect a lot on what are the attitude of people when we want to bring a solution, and we are a lot into the other. But I think it's like part of mapping the system in itself to integrate the worldview of the different people who are part of a problem or trying to solve the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't know if that was complex or.
No, I agree. I would add that usually also what we can see as practice in project management is that oftentimes we try to align towards a common solution. So yet again, I would say it really depends on what type of challenge you are facing. Sometimes the very definition of the project is already too narrow to allow divergence in what things we can try. So I understand what you are saying, but I also want to raise this fact that it's often framed in a way that's my question is, why we would like to necessarily always align goals? And who is the best to decide what goals, become the most important? And here we come in, I think, in an interesting discussion about epistemic injustice, in the sense where we leave a small amount of people deciding for the most, what is good or not. And I think we go back to the positive discussion where so I don't know if I would not say that there's necessarily a way to tackle this, but I agree that
So essentially the point is that if you don't align people into a solution, or let's start with a problem, what is a problem to address? You will have a bunch of very creative, very talented people who will be pulling each other away, because everybody will understand the problem differently. So it is essential to start with that. So with your question, like, who decides what is actually the problem, or who decides what is the solution around this problem? Everybody should decide that. Of course, we will never be able to bring a solution that will kind of satisfy everybody, but it is important to integrate the viewpoints of the key people who have a stake in the solution finding of a problem. And this is why the importance of aligning whenever you have a problem, whenever you have a project, you need to align what is a goal. And this is why, if you don't do that, I believe many efforts, many initiatives, and we see that in real life. It's not just an abstract, it's not a concept. It's just like what we experience day to day when we go to meetings that are, just disaligned. They are just not coordinated, and essentially it's because there are different intentions, different perspectives that are not properly coordinated.
Yeah.
Can I ask you something? But because how do you look at Facebook then? Because I think Mark Zuckerberg has the goals, and everybody is aligned.
Yes.
So they have an incentive to swipe on their telephone, and then they use the data to manipulate you. And they don't agree with the goals of Mark Zuckerberg, I think.
Well, I personally don't feel manipulated. I use Facebook and I don't feel manipulated. But I think, I personally don't. I don't know really, like, maybe I'm unaware that I'm being manipulated. But I think just starting to question myself, am I being manipulated? It's a good start, right? To start figuring out, okay, how do you feel manipulated? So it's just critical thinking. But I believe Yeah, let's start with that, right? Like there are people who are not probably in their personal development are not there yet because either they are too young or they're not exposed to these kind of skills like critical thinking. You know, what am I consuming? How is this affecting my behavior? What do I think of the world, and what are the things that are influencing my worldview? But yeah, I think it's not a matter of the technology. Maybe the discussion should be more into what are the skills that we need to be able to use technologies effectively and efficiently to help transform our society.
But I think it's important what is it's moving now in the technology to help to resolve part of that. I think when we talk about a platform like Facebook, we are in the Web 2, so it's still centralized in the hierarchy of the decision of the value of the platform. When we move to what we call Web 3, what is more distributed and more linked to the stakeholders who decide the value of the platform, it will change completely. I think the key issue is when you have to some challenge is complex, there is interconnection. So when you try to solve something, it's interconnected and it creates another issue elsewhere in the system. So how do you solve this one? Probably technology can bring reduce the asymmetry information and having a better understanding between stakeholders what the values they want to create themselves. I think, but we have to move to technologies that allow moving from a centralized, even we think it's decentralized, but it's not a centralized system of platform, whereas the stakeholders are decentralized and having their own valuable interactivity in the system to solve some issue. But again, we are parting about this new DLT solution where we are owner of something.
Andrew?
Okay, thank you, Kevin. So I'm with you pretty much. I'm just wondering if you can like help us with two things. One is, so I got your explaining we should be different strategies to, to understand our island. So how do we, what's your view on how do we start designing our interventions, right? We're not ants. Michele would say we could act like ants, right? And we'd send little trails out and so on. So we're not ants. So how would you try to start, like just in a general way? And then how do you evaluate? Like how do and I know those are totally general questions, but you have any thoughts on those?
To whom are you asking?
To you.
To me? Okay. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have any kind of big insight on where to start and how to start. I mean, I'm kind of really, practical on those kind of things. Like when I'll give you an example because I work in an organization which is by definition really, rigid in terms of hierarchy and stuff like that. I'm working in the banking industry, and I see my organization as an island, basically, and close to it, there's many other islands that relates to, finance in general and how we do investment and stuff like that. But the organization itself is an island to me. And one thing we tried is to create a network within the, literally a network of people within the organization by creating, some kind of champions of people that we know are connected to others that has a way to interpret their local understanding of the organization in an interesting way. And this led to, actually try to change processes because we are discussions, we say, oh, let's try this. And we just tried it and see what happens. I mean, there's no, I think there's no good or bad way to start. There's no, bad place or bad ideas to try out. The only thing is how do you perceive the level at which you are trying to work, because there are expectations in the landscape depending on where you try to act. Like if I'm discussing, I'm being really practical. If I'm discussing with management people, they don't expect me to, bring a piece of software. They don't care about that. They care about, processes and people and stuff like that, you know, and politics also. So what can you bring them as a medium that allows them to act in a certain way that is, you know, change how things are done? It might be a process because this is what they are, you know, they are used to, and that's fine. I don't know. It's something as sometimes it's dumb, but it works. So so yeah, you don't have to, you know, overthink it. I don't think you have to.
Maybe
yeah.
we are
And just for the finish to answer the question about evaluation. Yeah, I don't have good answer. I'm looking for interesting way to evaluate, but basically what I'm doing right now is ask people what are criteria for them of the change they want to see, given given what they see, and then this is interesting to. I mean, it's already a good enough way to evaluate, but it's not perfect because.
Maybe I will just add, because we will probably close the record. We can continue to discuss, but it's 1 hour, so it's been. I think today what we did is to start the explorer, to create the stakeholder, and to see the channel of information between people, to start to have to understand the landscape. I think what we will do next time is, I think what Andrew and you were talking is, when you start to create this information flow, you move from data to information to knowledge. Then you have to understand the value behind, so the measurement, what we want to measure, and what the evaluation model we want to implement. And I think it will be the debate of the next one, and how to answer. There will be not clear answer like this one. It's again a wicked problem, but definitely I think it's part of the process. I think the first one is what we did today is to start something. When you are on an island, you can swim or you can walk. So now we walk.
Yeah.
So we will stop the recording, but of course, feel free to stay. So I think.
Yeah.